In the vast and ancient tapestry of Japanese folklore, there exists a realm of creatures that straddle the line between the natural and the supernatural. These beings, known as yokai, have been etched into the culture for centuries, woven into the fabric of everyday life. To understand yokai, we must first step into a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead, the real and the imagined, blur together in a haunting dance. For many, these creatures represent a time of profound fear, spiritual reverence, and deep-rooted traditions. But the world of yokai is not merely a series of tales to frighten children. These stories have a far deeper resonance in Japanese society. They reflect the fears, joys, and uncertainties of a people living in close connection with nature and the mysteries that lay hidden in the world around them. As far back as the Nihon Shoki, Chronicles of Japan, and the Kanjaku Monogatari, Tales of Times Now Past, written in the 8th to 12th centuries, references to creatures that could only be described as yokai began to emerge. These were not just fantastical creatures, but warnings, lessons, and symbols meant to explain the unexplainable. The term yokai itself is a relatively modern one, but the beings it describes are ancient. In Japanese, yokai can be translated as monsters, spirits, or demons, but the word encompasses much more than that. It signifies creatures that embody the unknown, beings whose nature is often elusive and ever-changing. Some are malevolent, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to pounce. Others are more neutral or even benevolent, acting as protectors or guides. However, despite their varying nature, yokai are consistently seen as representations of fear and mystery, often personifying the hidden forces of the natural world. The origins of yokai stories can be traced back to the spiritual beliefs of ancient Japan. Long before the Shinto religion, which celebrates a divine presence in nature, animistic beliefs held sway across the archipelago. People believed that everything in nature, from the wind to the mountains, the rivers to the trees, possessed its own spirit or kami. With such a worldview, it was not far-fetched to believe that the forces of nature could manifest as sentient beings, capable of both good and ill. In this way, yokai became the physical manifestations of these natural spirits, existing both to explain natural disasters and to offer warnings of dangers lurking in the world. Take, for example, the rivers and oceans, which were both a source of life and death for ancient Japanese people. Rivers, while providing water for agriculture and sustenance, were also unpredictable and dangerous. Drownings were a common threat, especially with the violent floods that could suddenly rise from seemingly calm waters. Thus, it was not surprising that spirits, such as the Kawa no Kami or River Kami, were believed to control these bodies of water. But these spirits were not benign or friendly. They were capricious, often malevolent, punishing those who failed to show respect. The river could offer life, but it could also take it away in an instant. The belief in such spirits turned what might have been a simple environmental hazard into an otherworldly phenomenon, blending human experience with spiritual reverence and fear. In the shadows of everyday life, yokai also served as explanations of the unknown, especially during times of illness, famine, or unexplained phenomena. The idea that supernatural beings could be responsible for misfortune allowed people to externalize their fears, giving them a framework to understand events that might otherwise seem random and senseless. When sickness spread through a village, or when a loved one disappeared without a trace, the presence of the yokai might explain these tragedies. The yurei, vengeful spirits of the dead, came to represent the powerful, unpredictable nature of death itself. These spirits were believed to return from the afterlife to wreak havoc on the living, often due to unresolved emotions or unfinished business. The yurei were not just stories of haunted houses or eerie figures, but powerful reflections of the psychological torment felt by the living. Their return to the mortal realm symbolized the unresolved grief and trauma of the living, unable to escape the inescapable ties that death created. The development of these stories also helped form the cultural mindset around mortality and the afterlife. In ancient Japan, death was not just an end but a transformation, and it was believed that the spirits of the dead could return to offer warnings, guide the living, or exact revenge. However, death was not the only powerful force that could influence human life. The kami of the natural world, including gods and spirits of forests, mountains, and rivers, were seen as possessing vast power over the fate of humankind. These creatures, yokai, bridged the gap between the human world and the spiritual one. They were neither wholly human nor fully divine, existing somewhere in between, embodying the uncertainty of the world around them. Furthermore, yokai legends often have an educational aspect. Many of the stories serve as cautionary tales, teaching individuals moral lessons about human behavior and interaction with the environment. For example, the kappa, a water demon resembling a turtle or amphibian, would trick children into the water, drowning them, but was also believed to be a symbol of filial piety. In certain versions of the story, if a person bowed to a kappa, the creature would bow back, causing the water to spill from its head and rendering it powerless. This dynamic highlights the value of respect, caution, and politeness, while simultaneously reminding listeners of the dangers of being too trusting. Through these stories, yokai became both figures of fear and education, weaving a complex tapestry of morality and terror. The world of yokai wasn't confined solely to the darkest corners of the forest or the deep waters of the rivers. These spirits existed among the people, sometimes interacting directly with the living, often taking on forms that were recognizable but still unsettlingly foreign. Consider the tengu, a bird-like creature associated with the mountains. While the tengu was protector in some myths, it was also a trickster, often testing the virtue of those who dared to venture into its domain. Its ability to shapeshift and deceive demonstrated a recurring theme within yokai stories: the uncertainty of appearances. What you saw may not always be what was there. This fear of the unknown, the fear that something ordinary could transform into something monstrous, was deeply ingrained in the psyche of the Japanese people. In this intricate web of mythology, yokai represented the fears and complexities of the human condition, our relationship with nature, our understanding of death, and our ability to live in harmony with forces beyond our control. But yokai were not merely projections of fear. They were also representations of hope. Many yokai serve as symbols of protection, guardians of sacred places, or harbingers of good fortune. They encapsulated the idea that the world, while filled with dangers and dark forces, also contained light, redemption, and the potential for personal growth. Thus, yokai tales were not just dark, spine-chilling narratives meant to frighten listeners into obedience. They were integral parts of Japanese culture that resonated on a deeper level. Each tale wove together the themes of life and death, the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknown. They were as much about the human experience as they were about the creatures that stalked the night. As we delve deeper into these stories, it's crucial to remember that yokai are not mere monsters to be feared. They are expressions of a culture's relationship with its own myths, the natural world, an eternal struggle to make sense of the mysteries that lie beyond the visible world. Each creature holds a mirror to human experience, capturing the anxieties, hopes, and dreams of people who have long known the balance of terror and reverence in the face of the unknown. The yokai world invites us to look not only at the things that go bump in the night, but also at the part of ourselves that dwell in the darkness, waiting to be understood. The birth of yokai legends is intricately linked to the ancient spiritual beliefs and practices of Japan. Long before the word yokai even existed, the seeds of these mythical creatures were planted in the collective imagination of a people deeply connected to nature, the supernatural, and the mysteries of life and death. The yokai were not just figments of imagination, but spiritual beings that bridged the gap between the human world and the realm of the unseen. Understanding the origins of yokai requires us to step back into a time when the natural world was seen as both a source of life and a realm fraught with danger, mystery, and spiritual significance. The early Japanese worldview was shaped by animism, the belief that all things, whether living or inanimate, contain a spirit or a kami, from the grandest mountains to the smallest stones, from the flowing rivers to the gusts of wind. Everything had its own essence, its own life force. This animistic belief gave rise to a deep reverence for nature, where the very forces of the earth were seen as unpredictable and often dangerous. The ancient people of Japan, living closely with the land, would have understood the fragility of life. Natural phenomena such as earthquakes, typhoons, and floods were not only terrifying but often inexplicable. In the absence of scientific understanding, these forces were attributed to supernatural beings, spirits that were believed to govern and control the forces of nature. This belief in nature's spirits was fundamental to early Japanese religion and can still be seen in the Shinto faith, which continues to thrive in modern Japan. Shinto teaches that kami are present in all things, and that humans must live in harmony with them. But while Shinto focuses on positive interactions with these spirits, it is clear that not all kami were benevolent. Some kami, especially those associated with dangerous or malevolent forces, could become vengeful and wrathful, transforming into what we now recognize as yokai. The birth of these supernatural creatures was, in many ways, a natural extension of this belief system. These beings came to embody the fears and dangers associated with nature, things that were beyond human control and understanding. In the earliest written records of Japan, such as the Nihon Shoki Chronicles of Japan, the stories of supernatural beings were already being documented. The Nihon Shoki, compiled in the 8th century, describes the creation myths of Japan, its gods, and the early history of the nation. Within these texts, we find references to spirits, demons, and other supernatural entities, although they were not yet fully developed as the yokai we recognize today. These early spirits were often associated with specific places or natural phenomena, such as the wind, mountains, or water. They were seen as powerful forces that could both protect and destroy. But it wasn't until later, during the medieval period, that the yokai began to take on their more recognizable forms. The Kanjaku Monogatari, Tales of Times Now Past, a collection of stories written between the 11th and 12th centuries, played a significant role in shaping the yokai legends that would follow. This collection, which includes tales of ghosts, spirits, and demons, captures the imagination of the medieval Japanese people and illustrates how the concept of yokai evolved during this period. Many of the stories in the Kanjaku Monogatari depict vengeful spirits, cursed beings, and supernatural entities that punish those who offend them or break social taboos. This period saw an explosion in the variety of yokai as the stories began to reflect the social anxieties, political unrest, and growing sense of the unknown that pervaded medieval Japan. The people of this time were increasingly aware of the fragility of life, the unpredictability of nature, and the omnipresence of death. The yokai became symbolic of these existential fears, embodying the darker side of existence. At the heart of the creation of yokai was the need to explain the unexplainable. In a time before modern science, when many diseases, natural disasters, and unexplained phenomena could not be understood or predicted, it was natural for people to seek out supernatural explanations. The night was a time when the unknown came alive, when spirits roamed freely and anything could happen. The appearance of a strange creature, an unusual noise, or a mysterious event could easily be attributed to the influence of a yokai. The stories of these creatures offered a way for people to make sense of the chaos and uncertainty of their lives. It wasn't just that yokai were scary. They were reflections of the human experience itself. The fear of the unknown, the tension between life and death, and the struggle to make sense of an unpredictable world. But not all yokai were malevolent. Over time, many of these creatures began to take on more complex roles in mythology. Some yokai were seen as protectors, guardians of sacred places, or beings that helped humans in times of need. The Tengu, for example, a bird-like creature associated with the mountains, was often seen as a protector of the forest, but it could also be mischievous and prone to tricks. These spirits were not simply creatures of fear. They were symbols of the balance between good and evil, chaos and order, and life and death. The shifting nature of yokai, some benevolent, some malevolent, mirrors the complexities of human existence itself. They were beings that were neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but were instead deeply intertwined with the forces of nature that govern life. One of the key factors in the evolution of yokai was the interaction between humans and the environment. As people moved from rural areas to the growing urban centers of Japan, their understanding of the natural world shifted. The bustling cities of the medieval period, such as Kyoto and Edo, were places of constant activity, where the threat of supernatural creatures seemed distant and less immediate. However, the belief in yokai remained strong, as people continued to fear the unknown forces that lay outside the walls of the city. In the rural areas, where people live in closer proximity to the wild, the yokai remained a vivid part of daily life. These creatures were not simply stories told around the fire. They were seen as real, present forces that could shape the course of human events. The stories of yokai became a way to bridge the gap between the rural and the urban, the natural and the supernatural. In many ways, the yokai represented the deep-seated fear that the modern world was disconnected from the ancient forces of nature. As industrialization and urbanization took hold, people increasingly looked back to these myths, seeing them as a way to reconnect with the natural world and the primal fears that once governed their lives. The yokai were a reminder of a time when people were more attuned to the mysteries of the world and the forces that lay hidden just beyond their understanding. The concept of yokai also became deeply entwined with Japan's cultural history, especially during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, when urbanization and mass literacy allowed for the widespread dissemination of yokai tales. The publication of illustrated books, such as kiboshi, picture books, and the rise of ukiyo-e woodblock prints, allowed people to engage with the stories in new ways. Artists and writers began to depict yokai in increasingly vivid and fantastical forms, and these creatures became a central part of the popular culture. The fascination with yokai reached its peak during this time, with entire communities of people gathering to share and discuss these supernatural tales. Yokai festivals, where people would dress as their favorite creatures, became commonplace in urban centers like Edo. These festivals allowed people to explore their fears in a safe communal setting, providing an outlet for the anxieties and uncertainties of life. But as much as yokai were a source of fear, they were also a source of comfort. The stories of these creatures offered a way for people to process their emotions, confront their deepest fears, and explore the mysteries of the universe. They were not merely tales of terror, but also reflections on the human condition. In a world filled with unpredictability and uncertainty, the yokai were a way for people to make sense of the chaos and find meaning in their existence. The creatures embodied the dark, mysterious forces of nature, but they also held the potential for transformation and enlightenment. In the end, yokai were not just monsters to be feared. They were mirrors of the human soul, reflecting our deepest fears and our most profound desires. The evolution of the yokai was, in many ways, a reflection of the changing dynamics of Japanese society. From the early animistic beliefs that gave birth to these creatures, to the complex and multifaceted beings that emerged in the medieval and Edo periods, the yokai evolved as a symbol of both fear and fascination. As the world changed, so too did the creatures that inhabited its shadows. Yet, through it all, the yokai remain a constant reminder of the mysteries of the world and the forces that lie just beyond our understanding. They were and still are an enduring part of Japan's cultural heritage, offering a window into the past and a way to confront the unknown. In the ancient world of Japan, fear was not merely an emotion to be suppressed or ignored. It was a powerful force that shaped society in profound ways. Fear was an integral part of the human experience, deeply embedded in the psyche of the people, influencing their daily lives, their religious practices, and their relationships with the supernatural. This fear was not just born out of danger or threat, but was also tied to the unknown, the unseen, and the invisible forces that govern the natural world. It was a fear of the things that could not be controlled, explained, or understood, things that existed just beyond the edges of perception. This pervasive fear found expression in the many yokai stories that became the foundation of Japanese folklore. These stories served as not only entertainment, but also as a reflection of the anxieties and uncertainties of the time. The human experience in ancient Japan was one of constant confrontation with the unpredictable forces of nature. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and typhoons were regular and often devastating occurrences. The environment, while beautiful and bountiful, was also dangerous and capricious. Rivers that provided water for agriculture could flood unexpectedly, turning fertile lands into treacherous swamps. Storms could wipe out entire villages, and lightning could strike down the tallest trees and homes. These natural disasters were beyond human control and were often inexplicable. In the absence of scientific understanding, people looked to the supernatural to explain these events. They believed that the forces of nature were not simply random occurrences, but were controlled by powerful spirits, kami, that could either be benevolent or wrathful. The role of fear in Japanese culture was not limited to the threat of nature. However, death and the afterlife were also deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness. Unlike in some cultures, where death was often seen as a finality or a peaceful transition, in Japan, death was viewed as a mysterious and potentially dangerous force. Spirits of the dead were believed to remain among the living, unable to find peace until their unfinished business was resolved. This concept of restless spirits gave rise to many of the ghostly yokai that populate Japanese folklore, such as the yurei, vengeful spirits of those who had died under tragic or unjust circumstances. The presence of the dead was not seen as a comforting or natural thing, but as a potential source of terror. The dead, in their grief and rage, could reach out from the afterlife to harm the living, and this fear was pervasive in every aspect of Japanese life. The combination of fear of nature and fear of the dead created a worldview in which everything was imbued with the potential for both beauty and danger. People believed that the natural world, while full of awe-inspiring beauty, was also a realm of peril. The forest, the mountains, the rivers, all of these were places where spirits dwelled and where the line between the living and the dead was thin. There were no boundaries between the human world and the spiritual world. They were intricately intertwined. The night, in particular, was a time when the boundary between these two realms became almost non-existent. The darkness of night seemed to bring with it an oppressive atmosphere of fear, a sense that the unseen forces of the world were awake and active. This sense of the unknown became a central element in the creation of yokai. Yokai, as embodiments of fear, were the manifestations of the human struggle to understand and cope with these unpredictable forces. They were born from a need to give shape to the fears that people could not fully comprehend. The kappa, for instance, a water creature that lured children into rivers to drown them, symbolized the hidden dangers of water and the fear of drowning. It was an expression of the fear that the very element that sustained life could also take it away. Similarly, the yurei, the restless spirits of the dead, reflected the fear of death itself. They were not the peaceful spirits of ancestors that one might expect in other cultures. They were angry, vengeful, and capable of wreaking havoc on the living. These creatures did not simply represent death. They embodied the terror of death, an unknown, uncontainable force that could strike without warning. The influence of this fear extended beyond the supernatural realm and into the structure of society itself. In feudal Japan, social order was paramount. The hierarchical system of samurai, peasants, and merchants was strictly enforced, and disobedience was often met with harsh punishment. But the stories of yokai were not just meant to frighten people into submission. They also served as cautionary tales. Many yokai legends were warnings to people to behave in certain ways or face the consequences. For instance, the tengu, a bird-like creature that lived in the mountains, was often depicted as a trickster and protector. It would punish those who showed disrespect or arrogance, particularly those who were unworthy of their status. The tengu represented not only the dangers of the physical world, like falling off a mountain, but also the dangers of spiritual arrogance. It was a reminder that respect for nature and for the unseen forces was necessary for survival. Similarly, many yokai stories were centered around moral lessons. They served as metaphors for the consequences of human actions. The yurei, for example, were often spirits of individuals who had been wronged in life and had not received justice. These vengeful spirits would return to seek retribution from those who had wronged them. The fear of these spirits was a reflection of the fear of living an unjust life, of committing sins without paying the price. The yurei were not simply ghosts. They were the manifestation of unresolved human emotions, guilt, anger, sorrow, emotions that could not be buried in the grave. The fear of the yurei was not just the fear of encountering a ghost, but the fear of living a life that might invite such a spirit into the world of the living. The connection between fear and morality in Japanese folklore is deeply significant. The yokai were not just stories of monsters and spirits. They were reflections of the human condition, of the dangers that existed both in the physical world and in the moral and spiritual dimensions of life. They embodied the anxiety that comes with the awareness of one's own vulnerability to the natural world, to the forces of death, and to the consequences of one's actions. Fear was a tool for navigating life. It was a way of understanding the forces that lay beyond the visible world, of acknowledging that there were things in life that could not be controlled or predicted. By confronting these fears through stories of yokai, people were able to make sense of the chaos and danger that surrounded them. As these stories evolved, they became more complex. Some yokai began to take on dual roles, representing both fear and protection. The tengu, for example, was both a creature that punished the arrogant and a guardian of the mountains, teaching people the importance of humility and respect for nature. The kappa was both a dangerous creature and a symbol of the hidden dangers that lurk beneath the surface. The complexity of these creatures mirrored the complexity of the human experience itself. People were not just afraid of these creatures. They were fascinated by them. The yokai were not simply monsters to be feared. They were reflections of the world, of human nature, and of the unknown forces that shape both. The fear of yokai, then, was not just a superficial emotion. It was a way of engaging with the world. It was a way of confronting the unknown, of coming to terms with the things that could not be explained or understood. In many ways, the stories of yokai were a form of catharsis, allowing people to explore their deepest fears in a controlled and safe way. By confronting these creatures in stories, people could come to terms with the dangers of the world, both real and imagined. The fear of yokai was a fear that acknowledged the limits of human understanding, the frailty of life, and the unpredictable forces that shaped existence. This fear was not something to be avoided or denied. It was something to be embraced. In the stories of yokai, people found a way to understand their fears and come to terms with them. The creatures of folklore were not just symbols of terror. They were representations of the human struggle to understand and navigate the world. They were the dark side of the human experience, but they were also an essential part of that experience. Without the fear of yokai, the human world would be incomplete. Fear was not just a response to danger. It was a vital force that shaped the way people lived, thought, and understood their place in the world. Through the stories of yokai, the people of Japan confronted the unknown and came to terms with the fact that, in the end, there is no true certainty in life. There are only the forces of nature, the spirits of the dead, and the constant struggle to understand them. The yokai embodied the struggle, and in doing so, they became a mirror of the human soul. Rivers in ancient Japan were not merely bodies of water. They were sacred, powerful forces of nature, revered and feared in equal measure. The flow of the river was seen as a reflection of life itself, always moving, always changing, and often unpredictable. The river, in its vastness and mystery, symbolized both life-giving sustenance and a formidable, uncontrollable force. This duality is what made it the perfect setting for one of the most terrifying yokai in Japanese folklore, the kawa no kami, or river spirits. The kawa no kami were the deities and spirits that inhabited the rivers, and their nature, like the water they ruled, could be both benevolent and malevolent, calm and destructive. In ancient Japan, water was an essential and revered part of life. Rivers provided the necessary water for agriculture, transportation, and survival. They were the lifeblood of communities. Yet they were also capricious. In times of drought, rivers could dry up, leading to famine and suffering. In times of heavy rains, rivers could flood, destroying crops, homes, and even entire villages. These natural events were deeply unsettling, and without the scientific knowledge to understand or predict them, the people of Japan looked to the supernatural to explain these forces. Rivers, with their power to both nourish and destroy, became associated with gods and spirits, some that could offer blessings and protection, and others that could bring ruin. The kawa no kami were among the most influential of these river spirits. In Shinto belief, rivers were sacred places, believed to be inhabited by kami, the spirits that represent natural forces and phenomena. These kami were not only present in the tranquil rivers that provided life, but also in the dangerous, violent ones that could sweep away everything in their path. The kawa no kami could be both protectors and avengers, depending on how they were treated by humans. To honor the kawa no kami, people would often perform rituals or offer prayers, hoping to avoid their wrath and to receive their blessings. However, the same spirits that gave life could also take it away in the blink of an eye. The stories surrounding the kawa no kami are rich with symbolism and mystery. In some tales, the river spirits are depicted as fierce protectors of their domains, punishing those who disrespected the river or failed to honor it. In other stories, the kawa no kami are portrayed as vengeful beings who cause floods and drownings as punishment for human arrogance or neglect. The unpredictability of the river was embodied in these tales. Just as a river could be peaceful and calm one moment, it could transform into a raging torrent the next. The dual nature of the kawa no kami reflected the ever-changing and often dangerous qualities of the river itself. One of the most chilling aspects of the kawa no kami legends is their connection to drowning. In ancient Japan, drowning was one of the most feared forms of death. The very act of being swallowed by the water, pulled under by unseen forces, was terrifying in its suddenness and finality. The stories of kawa no kami often involved the drowning of humans, particularly those who disrespected the river or failed to make the proper offerings to the spirits. It was believed that the Kawano Kami could cause a person to fall into the river, where they would be consumed by the water, never to be seen again. This fear of drowning was not just a fear of the physical act of being submerged in water, but also a fear of being taken by a powerful unseen force, the river spirit that held dominion over life and death in the watery depths. In these stories, the river was not just a setting but character in itself, a living, breathing entity with its own desires, motives, and emotions. It was not simply a passive force that humans interacted with, but an active participant in the drama of life. The Kawano Kami were the personification of the river's power and unpredictability. The river could be both life-sustaining and deadly, a constant reminder of the tenuous relationship between humans and nature. It was a force that could not be tamed, controlled, or fully understood. In many ways, the Kawano Kami represented the idea that nature was something to be both respected and feared. It was not to be conquered, but coexisted with. The river spirit was an embodiment of nature's power, reminding humans of their vulnerability in the face of the natural world. In some legends, the Kawano Kami were not just vengeful spirits, but also beings capable of empathy and compassion. There were stories where the river spirit would save a person from drowning or protect a community from a flood. These stories often centered around humans who had shown the river proper respect or had made offerings to the Kawano Kami in times of need. In these cases, the river spirit was portrayed as a guardian, capable of both destruction and protection, depending on the nature of the human interaction. These stories were meant to reinforce the idea that while the forces of nature were uncontrollable and dangerous, they could also be appeased with the right actions. They taught that humans had a responsibility to honor and respect the natural world, or else they risked incurring its wrath. The symbolism of the Kawano Kami extends beyond the river itself. Water, in many cultures, is seen as a liminal force, neither fully alive nor dead, neither fully good nor evil. It represents a boundary between life and death, between the known and the unknown. The river is a threshold, a crossing point from one state of being to another. In Japan, this symbolism is especially potent. The river was a boundary between the human world and the spirit world, between life and death. The Kawano Kami, as guardians of the river, were the intermediaries between these two realms. They had the power to ferry souls to the afterlife, to guide or to destroy, depending on how they were treated by the living. In this way, the Kawano Kami were seen as both the protectors and the destroyers of life, capable of both healing and harm. This liminality is also reflected in the appearance of the river spirits in yokai folklore. The Kawano Kami often took on a human form, but one that was strange and unsettling. They might appear as women or men with long, flowing hair, their features pale and ghostly, evoking the same sense of otherworldliness as the waters themselves. In some stories, the river spirit would lure people into water, tempting them with promises of safety or knowledge, only to pull them under when their guard was down. This seduction was not just a physical act, but a representation of the allure and danger of the river itself, appealing yet deadly. The stories of these spirits often emphasize the difficulty of resisting the pull of the river, just as it was difficult to resist the lure of the unknown. The Kawano Kami embodied the tension between attraction and fear, between desire and destruction. The fear of the Kawano Kami was also tied to the idea of impurity. In Shinto belief, purity was of utmost importance, and it was often linked to the concept of water. Rivers were considered to be cleansing forces, capable of purifying both the body and the soul. But the river could also become a source of impurity. In the legends of the Kawano Kami, those who polluted the river or failed to maintain the proper rituals were often punished by the spirits. The purity of the river was sacred, and any violation of that purity could bring about devastating consequences. This connection between impurity and punishment added another layer to the fear of the Kawano Kami. It wasn't just that the river could drown you, it could also taint your soul, dragging you down to an eternal, polluted fate. The role of the Kawano Kami in these stories underscores the importance of balance in the natural world. The river, like the rest of nature, was a force that could not be fully controlled. Humans could not tame it, but they could respect it. The fear of the Kawano Kami was not simply the fear of a supernatural creature. It was a fear of being out of balance with the world around them. The spirits of the river were not inherently evil, but they were reflections of the raw, untamed power of nature. To live in harmony with them required understanding, respect, and ritual. The Kawano Kami were as much about maintaining this balance as they were about instilling fear. Through the stories of these spirits, the people of ancient Japan were reminded of their place in the world, not above nature, but a part of it. They were not its masters, but its stewards, tasked with respecting the natural forces that shaped their lives. In many ways, the Kawano Kami represented the delicate line between reverence and fear, between life and death. They were creatures of great beauty and great danger, just as the river itself could be calm and inviting one moment and violent and destructive the next. These river spirits were reminders of the unpredictable nature of the world, where nothing was ever entirely safe or fully understood. They embodied the duality of nature itself, both nurturing and destructive, and serve as powerful symbols of the forces that lay beyond human control. Through the tales of the Kawano Kami, the people of Japan were reminded that the natural world was both a source of life and a potential threat, and that it was always better to tread carefully along its shores. The mountains of Japan have long been considered sacred spaces. They are towering, ancient, and filled with an ethereal energy that stirs reverence, awe, and at times, fear. In many ways, the mountains represent the untamable forces of nature, unreachable, unyielding, and capable of both offering great beauty and causing destruction. These mountains, which form the backbone of the Japanese archipelago, have always been central to the culture, religion, and mythology of Japan. The towering peaks are not just physical landforms. They are sacred territories inhabited by spirits, gods, and sometimes terrifying creatures known as yokai. One of the most fascinating and fearsome of these creatures is the Tengu, a powerful being associated with the mountains. The Tengu straddles a line between spirit and demon, between protector and trickster, and is one of the most iconic yokai in Japanese folklore. The Tengu is often depicted as a bird-like humanoid, with sharp features, red skin, and a long, beak-like nose. Its appearance varies depending on the region and the time period, but it is almost always shown as a fierce and otherworldly being. In some depictions, the Tengu appears as a full bird with a humanoid body, its wings spread wide as it soars above the mountains. In others, it takes the form of a half-human, half-bird creature with wings on its back and talon-like feet. Its most striking feature, however, is its nose, which is often exaggerated in size, symbolizing its supernatural nature. The Tengu is a being that evokes both fear and admiration, as it is both a guardian and a challenger to those who venture into the mountains. At the heart of the mythology surrounding the Tengu is its deep connection to the mountains. The mountains were seen as places where the physical and spiritual realms intersected, and they were believed to be inhabited by gods and spirits. In ancient Japan, mountains were not merely geographical features. They were sacred spaces that served as the homes of powerful beings. The Tengu, in particular, is often depicted as a protector of the mountains, a guardian spirit that watches over the forests and hills. It is said that the Tengu would protect the sacredness of the mountains, punishing those who dare to disrespect or defile them. However, the Tengu was not just a benign protector. In many stories, the Tengu is portrayed as a trickster and a figure of mischief, using its cunning and supernatural abilities to deceive and outwit those who dare to challenge its domain. Travelers, particularly those who ventured into the mountains with disrespect or arrogance, were often the victims of the Tengu's tricks. The creature would lead them astray, making them lose their way in the dense forest or causing them to become disoriented. Sometimes, it was said that the Tengu would challenge people to contests of skill or intelligence, using its supernatural abilities to outsmart them. In these cases, the Tengu was not so much a malevolent force as a teacher, showing humans the importance of humility, respect, and caution when interacting with nature. The dual nature of the Tengu, as both protector and trickster, reflects the larger spiritual landscape of ancient Japan. The mountains were seen as sacred, yet dangerous. They were home to gods, spirits, and beings that could be both nurturing and destructive. The Tengu, as a guardian of the mountains, symbolized this balance. It was a creature that could protect travelers who showed respect and reverence of the mountains, but it could also punish those who showed disrespect. The Tengu was a reminder that nature was not something to be dominated, but something to be approached with humility and care. It embodied the idea that humans were not the masters of the natural world, but rather participants in a larger spiritual ecosystem. This relationship between humans and nature, mediated by the Tengu, was central to the spiritual beliefs of ancient Japan. Shinto, the indigenous religion of Japan, teaches that all things in nature have a spirit or kami, and that humans must live in harmony with these spirits. The mountains, with their powerful presence and spiritual significance, were seen as places where the kami resided. The Tengu, as a protector of these sacred spaces, embodied the idea that the natural world was filled with both benevolent and malevolent forces, and that humans had a responsibility to respect these forces. The Tengu was both a guardian and a teacher, showing that respect for nature was not simply a matter of obedience, but a matter of survival. In addition to its role as protector and trickster, the Tengu also held a more complex, ambiguous position within Japanese folklore. Over time, the Tengu evolved from being a fearsome, otherworldly creature into a more humanized figure. In some stories, the Tengu is depicted as a wise and knowledgeable being, capable of teaching martial arts or guiding people through difficult situations. In these stories, the Tengu becomes a figure of wisdom and power rather than just a dangerous spirit. The connection between the Tengu and martial arts is especially significant. The Tengu was believed to possess great skill in swordsmanship, archery, and other forms of combat, and many legends tell of warriors seeking out the Tengu for training. In these stories, the Tengu becomes a teacher, imparting its knowledge to those who are worthy. This transformation of the Tengu from a fearsome creature into a mentor figure reflects the changing views of nature and the supernatural in Japanese society. The evolution of the Tengu into a more human-like figure also reflects the growing influence of Buddhism on Japanese culture. As Buddhism spread throughout Japan, it brought with it new concepts of spirituality and the afterlife, and the nature of the Tengu began to shift. In earlier stories, the Tengu was primarily associated with Shinto beliefs as a guardian spirit of the mountains and a symbol of the power of nature. But as Buddhism took root in Japan, the Tengu became associated with the concept of asceticism and self-discipline. The Tengu was seen as a kind of hermit or monk, living in isolation in the mountains and practicing rigorous spiritual disciplines. This shift in the Tengu's character reflected the broader changes in Japanese religious thought during the medieval period, as Buddhist teachings began to influence the way people viewed nature, spirituality, and the supernatural. The role of the Tengu in Japanese folklore also speaks to the cultural and psychological relationship that the Japanese people have had with nature. Nature was never seen as a benign, passive force. It was always alive, vibrant, and full of power. The Tengu was a manifestation of this vitality. It was a creature that was intimately connected to the natural world, and its presence in the mountains was a reminder that nature could not be controlled or tamed. The Tengu was a warning to humans that they could not simply take from nature without giving back, that the mountains and forests were not places to be exploited or conquered, but places to be respected and protected. The Tengu's role as both protector and a trickster also reflects the balance between fear and admiration that people have for nature. Nature in all its forms can be both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It can give life, but it can also take it away. The Tengu, with its supernatural powers and dual nature, embodies this paradox. It is both a creature of fear and a creature of respect. It is a reminder that nature is not something that can be easily understood or controlled, but something that must be approached with reverence and humility. In this way, the Tengu serves as a powerful symbol of the relationship between humans and the natural world, a relationship that is always in flux, always changing, and always full of mystery. The Tengu also serves as a symbol of the tension between civilization and the wild. As Japan's cities grew and its people became more urbanized, the mountains, with their primal energy and spiritual significance, became increasingly distant. Yet, the Tengu remained a figure of fascination and fear, a reminder of the untamed forces that still existed just beyond the reach of cities. The Tengu represented the parts of nature that could not be domesticated or controlled, and its presence in Japanese folklore serves as a reminder that, no matter how far society moves from the wilderness, the wildness of nature can never truly be left behind. In the end, the Tengu is a creature of complexity. It is not just a monster or a demon. It is a symbol of the spiritual and physical forces that shape the world. The Tengu embodies a reverence and fear that nature inspires, as well as the respect and caution that humans must have when interacting with the world around them. It is both protector and challenger, reminding people that nature is both beautiful and dangerous, nurturing and destructive. Through the stories of the Tengu, the people of Japan were reminded of their place in the world, not as masters of nature, but as part of a larger, spiritual and natural order that must be respected, understood, and, at times, feared. In the realm of Japanese folklore, the vast and mysterious world of spirits and creatures is filled with beings that embody not just fear, but also curiosity, intrigue, and wonder. Among these creatures is one that continues to captivate the imagination of many: Kappa, a water yokai with a reputation that ranges from mischievous trickster to a deadly force. The Kappa is a creature of the rivers, ponds, and other bodies of water, and its presence in folklore speaks to the deep-seated connection between the Japanese people and the aquatic environments that were so crucial to their survival and cultural life. The fear and fascination with the Kappa also reveal much about the worldview of ancient Japan, a place where natural forces were not simply accepted, but were imbued with spiritual meaning and power. At first glance, the Kappa seems almost comical. It is often depicted as a small, humanoid creature with a beak-like mouth, webbed feet, and a shell on its back, resembling something akin to a turtle or frog. Its most distinctive feature, however, is the bowl-shaped depression on its head, which is said to hold water. This water is vital to the Kappa's existence. If the water in its head dries up or spills, the creature loses its power, and it can be rendered helpless. This vulnerability, while seemingly amusing, hints at the deeper nature of the Kappa and its place within the folklore of Japan. The Kappa is both a creature to be feared and a being that reflects a human need to understand the strange, unpredictable nature of the water that surrounds them. The Kappa is an embodiment of the dangers of water itself. Rivers, lakes, and ponds were essential to the survival of ancient Japan, providing water for drinking, irrigation, and transportation. However, they were also unpredictable forces. The calm waters could suddenly transform into violent torrents during a storm, and drowning was a common cause of death. In the absence of scientific explanations for these sudden, tragic events, the people turned to the supernatural to explain the dangers they faced. The Kappa became the physical manifestation of the dangers hidden beneath the water surface, a creature that lurked in the depths, waiting to pull the unwary traveler into the water. In some of the earliest legends, the Kappa is depicted as a malevolent force, pulling children and unwary adults into the water to drown them. This image of the Kappa as a child-snatching demon speaks to the deep fear of water that pervaded ancient Japanese society. Water was both a source of life and a source of death. It provided sustenance and nourishment, but it could also take life away in an instant. The Kappa was a manifestation of this duality. It was a creature that existed in the space between the known and the unknown, a reminder that the waters could not be fully understood or controlled. The fear of the Kappa was not just a fear of drowning, but a fear of the unseen, the things lurking beneath the surface, ready to claim their victims without warning. However, the Kappa was not purely evil. In some versions of the myth, the creature is depicted as a more mischievous being rather than an outright villain. It is said that the Kappa loves to challenge humans to sumo wrestling matches, and it enjoys playing tricks on them. In these stories, the Kappa is not the source of terror, but a playful trickster, engaging in harmless games with those who venture too close to the water. This trickster aspect of the Kappa reveals a more complex view of water in Japanese mythology. Water was not only a source of danger, but also a source of enjoyment and pleasure. The Kappa was, in this sense, a creature that embodied both the unpredictable and playful aspects of nature. The Kappa's playful side is also reflected in its interactions with other creatures and even with humans. One of the more famous stories involves a Kappa and a farmer. The farmer, seeking to rid himself of the troublesome creature, offered the Kappa challenge. He would provide the Kappa with cucumbers, which were the creature's favorite food, if it agreed to leave him alone. The Kappa accepted the offer, but the farmer had a trick up his sleeve. He placed a cucumber in the Kappa's bowl-shaped head, and the creature, unable to resist the temptation, leaned over to take a bite. In doing so, it spilled the water from its head, causing the Kappa to lose its power and rendering it helpless. In this version of the story, the Kappa is more a victim of its own greed and foolishness than an evil being bent on causing harm. The story reveals the importance of cunning, resourcefulness, and respect for the power of nature, as well as the idea that not all dangerous creatures are invincible. Despite the Kappa's playful side, it is still a creature to be feared. In many stories, the Kappa is depicted as a formidable opponent, capable of overpowering even the strongest of humans. It is said that the Kappa can pull people into the water with incredible strength, dragging them down to their watery graves. The creature is also believed to be capable of disemboweling its victims, removing their internal organs and consuming them. This gruesome aspect of the Kappa legend speaks to the deep fear of the unknown forces lurking in the water. It is a reminder that the natural world is full of dangers that cannot always be anticipated or avoided. The Kappa embodies the unpredictable nature of water itself. The fact that it can be both life-giving and deadly, nurturing and destructive. In addition to its connection with water, the Kappa also has strong associations with the idea of impurity. In Shinto, purity is of great importance, and water is often used as a cleansing agent. Rivers, streams, and lakes are seen as places where one can purify the body and spirit, washing away impurities. However, the Kappa represents the opposite of this purification. It is said to have a strong desire for human excrement, and in some stories, the Kappa is known to engage in acts of defilement, adding another layer of fear and revulsion to its character. The creature's association with impurity is also linked to its role as a boundary-crossing entity. It occupies the space between the human world and the world of nature, between the conscious and the unconscious. The Kappa's presence in the folklore of Japan speaks to the human desire to understand and control the forces of nature, but also the recognition that these forces are beyond human comprehension and control. The Kappa is also a creature that reflects the ancient Japanese attitude toward nature as a whole. In Japan, the natural world was seen as full of spirits that were both benevolent and malevolent, and whose favor had to be earned. The Kappa is a creature that operates in this moral gray area. It is a force of nature, neither entirely good nor entirely evil. It embodies the unpredictability of water, which can both sustain life and take it away. The Kappa also represents the need for humans to approach nature with respect and caution. The creature's power is not just physical. It is spiritual as well, and it is tied to the balance between the human world and the world of the supernatural. The Kappa serves as a reminder that humans must always be mindful of the forces around them, for these forces can shift from friend to foe in an instant. Over time, the Kappa legend has been adapted and modified, evolving into different forms depending on the region and the cultural context. In some areas, the Kappa is seen more as a creature to be outwitted, while in others, it remains a more terrifying figure. However, its central theme remains constant. The Kappa represents the unpredictable nature of water and the danger it poses to those who do not respect it. It is a creature that embodies the fear of the unknown and the limits of human control over nature. The stories of the Kappa remind us that nature is both a source of life and a force that can overwhelm and destroy. The creature's dual nature is both playful and deadly, reflects the complexities of the natural world itself. A world that cannot be fully understood, only respected and cautiously navigated. In the context of Japanese folklore, the Kappa is a powerful reminder of the deep connection between the people and the natural world. It is a reflection of the ways in which humans have always sought to understand the forces that shape their lives, whether they are forces of life like water or forces of death like the Kappa itself. The Kappa is not just a monster of folklore, but a symbol of the eternal struggle between human beings and the mysteries of nature that lie just beyond their reach. The creature serves as a bridge between the human world and the supernatural, reminding us that nature, with all its beauty and danger, will always be a source of both wonder and fear. The forests of Japan have long been a place of mystery and intrigue, where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural is often thin. These dense, mist-covered woods, with their towering trees and twisting paths, were not simply landscapes to be admired or feared for their physical dangers. They were also deeply spiritual spaces. In ancient Japan, the forest was considered a sacred realm, a place where spirits dwelled, where the unseen forces of nature could be felt, and where the line between the human world and the world of the gods became blurred. The creatures that inhabited these forests were not merely animals or insects. They were often yokai, spirits, and gods with mysterious powers, sometimes protective and other times vengeful. Among these beings, few evoke as much fear and fascination as the Jorogumo, the Spider Woman, a creature that embodies the eerie, unsettling, and dangerous qualities of the forest itself. The Joragumo is a yokai that has captivated the imaginations of people for centuries, with stories about it circulating throughout Japan's history. At its core, the Joragumo is a shape-shifting creature, capable of transforming from a beautiful woman into a monstrous spider in its human form. It is said to appear as a stunningly beautiful woman, often dressed in elegant clothing, with long flowing hair and a serene demeanor. She lures unsuspecting victims into the forest with her beauty, enticing them with her charm and promises of pleasure or wealth. However, once her prey is in her grasp, the Joragumo reveals her true form, her lower body transforming into a massive spider's abdomen, her many legs springing forth with terrifying speed. It is at this point that the victim realizes that they have been deceived, and the Joragumo's true nature comes to light. In some stories, the Joragumo spins intricate webs around her victims, trapping them in a deadly embrace, before slowly draining their life force or devouring them entirely. The mythology surrounding the Joragumo reflects a deep fear of the forest itself, a fear of the unknown, and of what might be lurking just beyond the reach of the human eye. The forests of Japan were often seen as places of danger, full of wild, untamed forces that could not be easily controlled or understood. The Joragumo, as a creature that can seamlessly transition between two vastly different forms, symbolizes the duality of the forest, its beauty and allure on one hand, and its danger and malevolence on the other. Just as the forest can be a serene and peaceful refuge during the day, it can also become a place of terror once night falls, a place where the rules of the human world no longer seem to apply. The Joragumo is not simply a creature of the forest, but a reflection of the complex relationship between humanity and nature, where beauty and danger are often intertwined, and where the line between the two can be easily crossed. The fear of the Joragumo also taps into the human instinct to be wary of the unknown, particularly when it comes to the natural world. In ancient times, the forest was a place of both sustenance and peril. It provided the resources necessary for survival, with for shelter, food from plants and animals, but also harbored many dangers. Wild animals, poisonous plants, and unpredictable weather conditions could make the forest a treacherous place. The Joragumo embodies the very essence of this danger. Her ability to transform from a harmless, alluring woman into a deadly predator reflects the dual nature of the forest itself. What appears to be a safe and inviting place could quickly become a place of death, as the forest was often full of hidden threats that could not be easily seen or understood. This duality makes the Joragumo one of the more terrifying yokai in Japanese folklore. She represents a constant tension between the allure and the danger of nature, a tension that anyone who has ventured into the deep forests of Japan or anywhere else can understand. In some versions of the Joragumo legend, the creature is depicted as a more tragic figure, one that is bound to her fate as a spider woman due to her own actions or desires. In these stories, the Joragumo is not just a villain, but a figure of sorrow and isolation. The transformation into a spider is sometimes seen as a curse, and her actions are often portrayed as a result of her loneliness or unrequited love. This interpretation adds a layer of complexity to the Joragumo legend, as it reflects the human tendency to view dangerous creatures and forces in nature as having motives and emotions that are understandable, if not justifiable. It suggests that, beneath the surface of terror, there may be a deeper sadness or a longing that drives the creature's actions. This duality, the Joragumo as both predator and victim, adds to the richness of her story and reinforces the idea that nature itself is not simply good or evil, but a force that encompasses a wide range of possibilities. The Joragumo is not just a creature that embodies the fear of the forest, but also a symbol of the ways in which danger can manifest in the human world. Her ability to take on the form of a beautiful woman, a figure often associated with desire and attraction, represents the deceptive nature of evil. The Joragumo uses her beauty to lure her victims in, playing on their desires and weaknesses. This reflects a deeper fear, the fear of being seduced or deceived by something that appears to be harmless or even desirable, only to discover that it is, in fact, a threat. The Joragumo embodies the human fear of temptation, of being drawn towards something dangerous and unknown, and the consequences that can come from giving in to those temptations. She is a reminder that not everything that appears beautiful or enticing is what it seems, and that beneath the surface of attraction lies the potential for harm. In some interpretations, the Jorigomo is also associated with the concept of punishment. Some versions of the legend suggest that she targets those who have wronged her in some way, often men who have shown her disrespect or have harmed other women. In these stories, the Jorigomo acts as an avenger, using her power to exact revenge on those who have wronged her or others. This aspect of the Jorigomo's nature reflects the idea that nature itself can be both nurturing and vengeful, responding to human actions in ways that can be both merciful and cruel. The Jorigomo becomes a symbol of the retribution that can come from a natural world when humans fail to respect it or when they act with malice or selfishness. The idea of the Jorigomo as a figure of vengeance also speaks to the larger role that yokai play in Japanese folklore. Many yokai, including the Jorigomo, are not simply creatures of terror. They are often beings that represent larger themes, such as justice, morality, and the consequences of human actions. The Jorigomo punishes those who stray from the moral path, serving as a reminder that actions have consequences and that the natural world will not hesitate to deliver retribution when it is needed. In this sense, the Jorigomo serves a moral function in folklore, teaching lessons about the dangers of greed, lust, and disrespect, and the importance of living in harmony with nature and others. The fear and fascination of the Jorigomo can also be seen as a reflection of the ancient Japanese understanding of the forces of nature. Nature was not seen as something that could be easily controlled or understood. It was a powerful, unpredictable force, and humans were often at its mercy. The Jorigomo, as a creature that could exist in two forms, one beautiful and alluring, the other monstrous and deadly, embodies this uncertainty and unpredictability. Just as nature could shift from peaceful to violent in an instant, so too could the Jorigomo change from a captivating woman to a deadly spider. This duality is what makes the Jorigomo such a compelling figure. She is not simply a monster to be feared, but a reflection of the complexity and unpredictability of the world itself. Her beauty and danger mirror the ways in which nature can both nurture and destroy, and the ways in which humans must navigate the fine line between the two. Over time, the Jorigomo has evolved into a more complex and layered character in Japanese folklore. While she remains a figure of fear, her portrayal has shifted to reflect broader themes of temptation, justice, and the consequences of human behavior. The stories of the Jorigomo continue to captivate audiences as they explore the tensions between beauty and danger, between love and death, and between the human and the supernatural. The Jorigomo is not just a creature of the forest, but a symbol of the eternal struggle between the known and the unknown, the safe and the dangerous, and the forces of nature that continue to shape the human experience. Through her, the people of Japan and people all over the world are reminded of the delicate balance that exists between humanity and the natural world, and of the dangers that can arise when that balance is disrupted. The concept of death and the afterlife has been a central theme in many cultures throughout history, and Japan is no exception. For centuries, the Japanese people have developed complex and intricate beliefs surrounding death, the spirit world, and the journey of the soul after death. Among the most intriguing and terrifying elements of Japanese folklore is a yurei, a type of ghost or spirit that is believed to be the restless soul of someone who died under tragic or unnatural circumstances. These spirits are often depicted as pale, wraith-like figures, draped in white burial clothes with long, unkempt hair and empty eyes. The yurei are often seen as the spirits of the dead who cannot find peace and are trapped between the world of the living and the world of the dead, seeking revenge or closure for the wrongs they suffered in life. The belief in the yurei has its roots in both Shintoism and Buddhism, the two primary religions of Japan. In Shinto, death was seen as a form of impurity, and the dead were believed to be spirits that could cause harm to the living if they were not properly cared for or appeased. In Buddhist belief, there is a concept of the bardo, a state between life and death, in which the soul must undergo various trials before it can find peace and be reincarnated. The yurei exists at the intersection of these two beliefs. They are souls that have not yet passed through the bardo or have become lost in the process, unable to move on because of the circumstances surrounding their deaths. The most common origin of a yurei is a violent or sudden death, particularly one that occurs through murder, suicide, or an accident. These deaths leave the spirit in a state of unrest, unable to find peace in the afterlife. The soul of the deceased person is believed to become trapped in the world of the living, often seeking revenge on the person or people responsible for their death, or seeking closure for the injustice they suffered. It is said that the Yuriai's presence is marked by a sudden drop in temperature, the feeling of being watched, or a sense of unease or dread. These spirits are often portrayed as vengeful and angry, their emotions heightened by the tragedy of their untimely deaths. The Yurii is a manifestation of the idea that death is not an end, but a process that must be properly concluded for peace to be attained. One of the most famous stories involving the Yurii is that of Oiwa, a woman whose tragic tale has been passed down through generations. According to the story, Oiwa was married to a man named Iman, who was not a good husband. Iman was an ambitious and greedy man, and he wanted to marry a wealthy woman, but his wife Oiwa stood in the way of his plans. One day, he decided to poison her, and over time, Oiwa's beauty was marred by the poison, leaving her with a disfigured face. In her anguish, she died, but before she did, she cursed her husband. After her death, Oiwa's spirit became a Yurii, seeking revenge on her husband. In some versions of the story, Iman is haunted by Oiwa's ghost, seeing her face everywhere he goes and hearing her voice calling for him. Eventually, in his madness, he meets his demise. The story of Oiwa is one of the most well-known ghost stories in Japan and has been adapted into various forms of media, from kabuki theater to film, and it serves as a chilling reminder of the vengeful power of the Yurii. The appearance of the Yurii is one of the most unsettling aspects of the myth, often depicted as a pale, translucent figure dressed in white burial garments, their long, disheveled hair flowing around their faces. Yurii are meant to evoke a sense of otherworldly unease. Their eyes are often empty or vacant, and their bodies are seen as either floating or dragging themselves across the ground, as if they are tethered to the mortal realm by a powerful force. The Yurii's appearance is meant to convey their inability to move on from their tragic deaths. They are souls that have become lost, stuck in a liminal space between the living and the dead, and their appearance reflects their sorrow, anger, and yearning for closure. In many Yurii legends, the presence of the spirit is accompanied by eerie phenomena. People who encounter Yurii often report strange feelings of coldness, inexplicable sounds, or a sensation of being watched. In some cases, the Yurii will make its presence known by whispering the name of its victim or by appearing in dreams, warning the living of its impending return. The Yurii is often associated with specific places, such as the site of the person's death or their burial ground, where the energy of the tragic event lingers. Some Yurii are even believed to haunt particular people, especially those who were involved in their deaths or who have wronged them in life. In these cases, the Yurii is not simply a spirit seeking peace, but a malevolent being that harbors deep resentment and a desire for revenge. The presence of a Yurii is always marked by a sense of impending danger, as these spirits are often seen as being powerful enough to cause harm to the living. The Yurii legend is also connected to the Japanese tradition of ancestor worship and the rituals surrounding death. In the Shinto religion, it was believed that the spirits of the dead remained close to their living descendants, and that they could either bring blessings or curses depending on how they were treated after death. Proper funeral rites and offerings to the deceased were seen as essential for ensuring that the spirit could pass peacefully into the afterlife. If the proper rituals were not performed, or the spirit was angered or neglected, it could become a Yurii, trapped in the world of the living and unable to move on. This belief underscores the importance of maintaining harmony between the living and the dead, and the notion that the dead had the power to influence the lives of the living. The concept of the Yurii reflects the anxiety surrounding death, particularly the idea that death is not always an end, but a complex transition, one that can be disrupted by improper rites or unresolved emotions. In many stories, the Yurii's vengeance is not only directed at the individual who caused their death, but also at anyone who becomes entangled in their curse. This further emphasizes the Yurii's power as a supernatural force that can transcend the boundaries of the physical world. People who come into contact with Yurii often find themselves drawn into a web of misfortune, as the spirit's anger spreads and affects others. This ripple effect is one of the key elements of the Yurii mythos, its ability to extend beyond the initial tragedy, ensnaring more and more people as it seeks to right the wrongs that were committed. The Yurii becomes a symbol of the consequences of unchecked emotions and unresolved issues, particularly those related to death and justice. In this way, the Yurii serves as a moral lesson, reminding people of the importance of respecting the dead and the forces that govern life and death. The role of the Yurei in Japanese folklore has not been limited to traditional stories and legends. Over the centuries, these ghostly spirits have become an enduring presence in Japanese literature, theater, and cinema. In kabuki theater, Yurei stories are often performed, with actresses portraying the tragic ghosts in dramatic and haunting performances. These stories continue to captivate audiences as they explore the themes of love, betrayal, and revenge, all intertwined with the specter of death. The Yurei has also made its way into modern horror films, where it has become one of the most recognizable symbols of fear in Japanese cinema. The international success of films like Ringu and Ju-on has brought the image of the Yurei to global audiences, further solidifying its place in popular culture. What makes the Yurei so compelling is not just the fear it evokes, but also the deep emotional and psychological themes it taps into. The Yurei is a symbol of the unresolved, of the past that refuses to be left behind. It is a manifestation of the emotions and traumas that remain after death, and the idea that the dead are never truly gone, that their spirits continue to linger in the world of the living. The Yurei reminds us that death is not always an end but a complex, ongoing process. Whether it is the restless spirit seeking revenge, the victim demanding justice, or the mournful soul unable to let go, the Yurei is a symbol of the deep, unresolved emotions that persist even after the body has died. In this sense, the Yurei is not just a fearsome ghost, but a reflection of the human struggle with mortality, loss, and the unresolved issues that continue to haunt the living. As a figure in Japanese folklore, the Yurei serves as a reminder that death is not merely a biological event, but a profound spiritual transition, one that can have a lasting impact on both the deceased and the living. The Yurei is not just a terror that lingers in the darkness. It is a reflection of the human experience with grief, justice, and the unresolved emotions that accompany death. Through the tales of the asterisk, why the nature of the supernatural world in Japanese folklore is complex and multifaceted, filled with creatures that embody both the wondrous and the terrifying. Among these beings, the Oni, often referred to as demons or ogres, stands out as one of the most iconic and fearsome. These creatures have been a part of Japanese mythology for centuries, and their appearances, roles, and meanings have evolved over time. The Oni embodies a wide range of symbolic meanings. They are representations of raw, untamed power, the embodiment of human fears, and, in many ways, a reflection of the darker aspect of human nature. Often depicted as towering figures with horns, fangs, and a frightening demeanor, the Oni has earned its place in stories that teach lessons about morality, justice, and the natural order. The Oni is most often depicted as a large, terrifying creature with bright red or blue skin, sharp claws, wild hair, and horns protruding from its forehead. Its eyes are typically fierce, and its face is contorted in a way that exudes anger and malice. In some depictions, the Oni is shown with an oversized mouth or sharp, pointed teeth, further emphasizing its monstrous and otherworldly nature. Its body is often muscular, representing its immense strength, and it is sometimes shown carrying a large club or weapon, further enhancing its image as a brutal and unstoppable force. These physical features make the Oni appear terrifying to the point that encountering one in folklore stories often means death or destruction. Historically, the Oni has been closely associated with evil and misfortune. In ancient Japan, people viewed the Oni as malicious spirits, demons that roam the earth causing harm to humans. These creatures were often seen as the instigators of illness, natural disasters, and other forms of misfortune. The Oni was, in many ways, the manifestation of the forces of chaos that threatened the order of the world. As malevolent entities, the Oni would frequently serve as antagonists in various myths, attacking villages, kidnapping people, or causing widespread destruction. Their appearance in these tales was meant to signify the presence of danger, to remind humans of the vulnerability of their existence, and to illustrate the consequences of neglecting the balance between nature, the supernatural, and society. However, over time, the portrayal of the Oni shifted in a more nuanced direction. While they remained figures of fear and power, they began to take on more complex roles in Japanese folklore. Some stories depicted the Oni as creatures capable of both good and bad actions. They could be seen as protectors or guardians in certain contexts, especially when their strength was needed to defend against other, even more fearsome forces. In some versions of the myth, Oni were guardians of specific locations or treasures, and while they were still formidable creatures, They could also possess wisdom and serve a protective role. In these stories, the Oni were often seen as beings whose anger or violent tendencies could be directed toward a righteous cause, such as defending the realm of the living from darker forces. One of the most famous examples of the dual nature of the Oni is the legend of Momotaro, the Peach Boy, a beloved figure in Japanese folklore. In this tale, Momotaro embarks on a journey to defeat a group of Oni who have been terrorizing the land. However, in the end, it is revealed that the Oni were not simply mindless demons. They were victims of greater evil, and their actions have been driven by necessity. In some variations of the story, Momotaro ends up befriending the Oni or offering them a way to redeem themselves. This shift in the Oni's role, from pure villainy to one of complexity and potential redemption, reflects the broader changes in how Oni were perceived. Over time, they evolved from being purely destructive forces into creatures that embody both capacity for violence and the potential for transformation and growth. The Oni is also deeply tied to certain seasonal celebrations in Japan. One of the most well-known traditions involving the Oni is Setsubun, a festival held at the beginning of February to mark the changing of the seasons. During this event, families will often perform a ritual to drive away evil spirits and bring in good fortune. One of the central elements of the Setsubun celebration involves the casting of roasted soybeans at an individual dressed as an Oni. This act, known as Meimaki, symbolizes the expulsion of evil and the welcoming of positive energy for the coming year. The Oni in this context represents the negative forces of the past year, and by driving them away, the hope is that peace, prosperity, and good fortune will follow. In this role, the Oni becomes less of an entity to be feared and more of a symbol for the darkness and hardships that everyone must overcome in life. In some stories, the Oni represents not just external evil, but also the darker aspect of the self. The Oni can be seen as a reflection of the inner demons that all humans possess: greed, rage, envy, and other negative emotions. These qualities, when left unchecked, can cause great harm both to oneself and to others. The Oni thus serves as a reminder of the importance of controlling one's passions and maintaining harmony with the world around us. The psychological aspect of the Oni is especially evident in the tale of Shoki the Demon Queller, a figure from Chinese and Japanese folklore who is often depicted with an Oni in his grasp. In this story, Shoki defeats the Oni by conquering his own inner demons, symbolizing the struggle between self-control and the temptation to give in to destructive impulses. The relationship between humans and the Oni is also a reflection of the balance between good and evil in Japanese mythology. The Oni exists as a constant reminder that evil forces are always lurking, but also that these forces can be defeated or transformed. In some myths, the Oni is ultimately vanquished by a hero who represents purity, virtue, or justice, often symbolizing the victory of order over chaos. However, other stories suggest that the Oni cannot be completely destroyed, only contained or tamed. The most famous example of this is the tale of the Oni king, Onawaka, who, though defeated, is never fully eradicated. This implies that evil forces are not always something that can be eliminated, but must be carefully managed, kept in check, or even reconciled with. Additionally, the Oni plays an important role in the mythological concept of Yomi, the Japanese underworld. In some versions of mythology, the Oni are said to dwell in Yomi, where they guard the souls of the deceased. This connection to the afterlife further deepens the complexity of the Oni as beings who are neither entirely evil nor purely malevolent. They are linked to the cycle of life and death, standing as gatekeepers between the living and the dead. In this sense, the Oni symbolizes the necessity of confronting and accepting the darker aspects of existence, including death and the forces that govern it. The Oni also serves as a symbol of rebellion against societal norms. In some stories, the Oni are portrayed as outcasts or rebels who defy the established order. They are often shown as living outside the bounds of civilization, dwelling in remote, desolate mountains or caves. Their actions, though violent and destructive, can be seen as an expression of freedom from societal constraints. In this way, the Oni represents the natural forces that resist human control, the elements of nature that cannot be tamed or understood, and the destructive potential of untamed passion. This interpretation of the Oni reflects the Japanese view of nature as something that is both beautiful and dangerous, a force that must be respected but never fully controlled. Over time, The Oni has become an enduring figure in Japanese culture, appearing in everything from literature and theater to art and modern media. Its image has shifted, but it remains a powerful symbol of both fear and fascination. The Oni represents the struggle between good and evil, order and chaos, an eternal battle between human frailty and the raw power of the natural world. Whether as a terrifying monster to be defeated or a misunderstood figure capable of redemption, the Oni continues to be a compelling part of Japanese folklore, a symbol of the darker forces that reside within and around us. The stories of the Oni remind us of the complexities of the world, where good and evil are not always clear-cut, and where power in all its forms must be carefully balanced to maintain peace and harmony. In the rich tapestry of Japanese folklore, few creatures are as enigmatic and multifaceted as the Tengu, often depicted as bird-like humanoid beings with the ability to soar through the skies. The Tengu has long captured the imaginations of people in Japan. These creatures are known for their sharp intelligence, formidable martial art skills, and their association with both the natural and supernatural realms. The Tengu has evolved over centuries, shifting from its origins as a malevolent and destructive force to becoming a more complex and, in some ways, even revered figure in Japanese mythology. The evolution of the Tengu offers profound insights into the way the Japanese have historically viewed the balance of power, human ambition, and nature's influence on both. The Tengu is most commonly depicted as a hybrid creature, half human, half bird. It has the body of a man but the head of a bird, often resembling a crow or a crane with a long, beak-like nose. Some depictions show the Tengu with wings, while others represent it as a more human-like figure, with red faces and sometimes even a set of claws. The creature's bird-like features are symbolic, as birds were historically viewed as beings that could transcend earthly boundaries, connecting the heavens and the earth. As creatures of the sky, Tengu were thought to have immense power, with the ability to control the winds to fly and to manipulate the natural world in ways that humans could not fathom. In the early legends, Tengu were often seen as malevolent beings who would terrorize humans, causing harm by leading travelers astray or even abducting children. These early representations of Tengu reflect the fear that the unknown, especially in the wilderness or mountains, could hold. The Tengu were said to dwell in the remote mountainous regions of Japan, places that were often seen as untamed and dangerous. These creatures were believed to have a deep connection to the natural world, particularly to the mountains and forests, which were seen as sacred places inhabited by powerful spirits and gods. The mountains were also places where the boundaries between the human world and the supernatural realm were considered thin. As such, Tengu came to embody both the awe and fear that people felt toward these sacred, mysterious spaces. One of the primary characteristics of early Tengu folklore was their association with mischief and malevolence. They were believed to cause accidents and disasters, playing tricks on unsuspecting humans. Often, they would use their powers to confuse travelers, leading them deep into the forest where they would become lost or encounter dangerous animals. Some stories even suggest that the Tengu would steal children, either as a form of punishment or simply out of caprice. In these tales, the Tengu represented the wild, untamed forces of nature that could not be easily controlled or understood, forces that would punish those who dared to venture too far into the natural world without respecting its power. The Tengu's tendency to cause mischief was not limited to physical harm. They were also known for disrupting human affairs, particularly those that involved martial arts. The Tengu was believed to be an expert in the martial arts and was said to train in the mountains far from human society. In some stories, the Tengu would challenge human martial artists to duels, often defeating them with ease. This association with martial prowess elevated the Tengu from a mere trickster to a more formidable figure. Their role in martial arts is particularly significant, as the Tengu came to be seen as both a guardian of traditional techniques and a teacher to those who could prove themselves worthy. Over time, the Tengu began to be portrayed not just as a villain, but also as a teacher, imparting their knowledge of combat to those who sought to learn from them. This shift in the Tengu's portrayal marked a change in how people viewed the creature, no longer simply a symbol of danger, but a complex being whose abilities could be used for both destructive and constructive purposes. As time went on, the Tengu underwent a transformation in its symbolic role within Japanese folklore. By the medieval period, the Tengu began to be associated with asceticism and spiritual discipline. The image of the Tengu evolved from that of a malicious, trickster demon into a more nuanced figure, a powerful being who was deeply connected to the practice of self-discipline and asceticism. This shift reflects the growing influence of Buddhism and Shintoism in Japan, both of which emphasize the importance of balance and the cultivation of inner strength. In these new representations, the Tengu became a symbol of spiritual power, representing the harmonious union of mind, body, and nature. This spiritual aspect of the Tengu was particularly evident in the association between the creature and mountain temples and shrines, where monks and ascetics practiced their meditations and rituals in isolation from the rest of society. The Tengu was now seen as a guardian of these sacred spaces, a protector of the sacred knowledge and practices that were passed down through generations of monks. The Tengu's association with asceticism also links it to the Japanese concept of yamabushi, a group of mountain-dwelling ascetics who practiced rigorous self-discipline, meditation, and physical training. The yamabushi sought enlightenment through their connection to nature and their ability to withstand the hardships of mountain life. The Tengu was often portrayed as a patron or protector of these ascetics, guiding them in their spiritual practices and teaching them the secrets of the mountains. The Yamabushi's connection to the Tengu was not only a spiritual one, but also a practical one, as the Yamabushi relied on the mountains for their livelihood, living off the land and relying on their connection to the natural world to sustain them. The Tengu, with its deep knowledge of the mountains and its power over the forces of nature, became a revered figure among these ascetics, representing the ideal of self-mastery and the ability to transcend the limitations of the human body. Despite their association with asceticism and spiritual wisdom, the Tengu retained elements of its earlier nature as a fearsome and unpredictable being. In some stories, the Tengu would still engage in acts of mischief, tricking travelers or leading them astray. In others, the Tengu would continue to challenge martial artists, testing their skills and pushing them to their limits. These stories reflect the idea that the Tengu was a figure who could not be easily categorized or understood. They were not simply good or evil, but force that represented the complexities of nature and the human experience. Sometimes a source of wisdom and guidance, other times a source of danger and destruction. The Tengu's ability to shift between these roles, protector and trickster, teacher and adversary, makes it one of the most fascinating creatures in Japanese folklore. In the stories of the Tengu, the boundaries between the natural world and the supernatural world are often blurred. The Tengu is both a creature of the mountains and a spiritual being, able to traverse the realms of the physical and the divine with ease. This duality reflects the broader Japanese view of nature and the supernatural, a world in which the two are intimately connected, and where the forces of nature can be both benevolent and malevolent, depending on how they are approached. The Tengu's connection to both nature and the spiritual realm is also evident in its role as a protector of the mountains and forests. In some versions of the Tengu legend, these creatures are seen as guardians of sacred sites, such as shrines, temples, and sacred groves. They were believed to watch over these areas, ensuring that no one would desecrate the sacred spaces where humans came to connect with the divine. In this role, the Tengu is a symbol of the power and sanctity of nature, a reminder that nature itself is sacred and must be respected. The Tengu is also a symbol of the struggle between humans and nature, the idea that humans must learn to live in harmony with the natural world, rather than trying to conquer it or exploit it for personal gain. In modern Japan, the Tengu continues to be a figure of both fear and reverence. The Tengu has appeared in countless works of art, literature, and theater, from traditional No and Kabuki performances to contemporary anime and manga. In these modern representations, the Tengu's image has evolved, but its symbolic power remains the same. It is still seen as a creature that embodies both the dangers and the wisdom of the natural world, and it serves as a reminder of the balance that must be struck between humanity and nature. Whether as protector, a trickster, or a teacher, the Tengu remains a central figure in Japanese folklore, embodying the complexity and mystery of the natural world that continues to captivate and intrigue people to this day. In the vast and intricate landscape of Japanese folklore, one of the most haunting and deeply evocative beings is the Yuki-onna, the Snow Woman. A spectral figure tied to the cold, desolate landscapes of winter, the Yuki-onna is both a personification of nature's chilling beauty and a reflection of the fears that accompany isolation and the harshness of nature. This mythical figure is often depicted as a beautiful woman clad in white, her features pale as snow, with long black hair and a haunting presence. Her story, however, is not just about her appearance or her association with snow. It is a tale of seduction, danger, vengeance, and the survival instinct. The Yuki-onna is most commonly portrayed as a ghostly figure that appears during snowstorms or in remote, mountainous regions where the snow falls heavily and where the wilderness can become a place of great peril. Her figure is ethereal, almost otherworldly, and she is often described as being incredibly beautiful. Her skin is white as the snow surrounding her, and her clothing often a flowing white robe. Her long black hair contrasts starkly against her pale complexion, and her gaze is said to be both cold and mesmerizing, luring those who encounter her into a sense of trance-like vulnerability. The Yuki-onna is not merely a beautiful woman. She is a spirit of nature, an embodiment of the cold and harsh winter months. Her presence serves as a reminder of the treacherous conditions of the natural world, where beauty can hide danger and the gentle snow can turn into a lethal force. The Yuki-onna's most defining characteristic is her ability to freeze those who come too close to her. She is often said to possess the power to freeze people with her icy breath or touch, leaving them to perish in the unforgiving cold. Some stories depict her as a vengeful spirit, driven by an anger or sadness that causes her to harm others, while others suggest that her actions are more a reflection of the harshness of nature itself. In these stories, the Yuki-onna becomes a symbol of the ruthless, indifferent forces of winter, nature's ability to claim lives without reason or mercy. Yet, despite the danger she represents, there is often a sense of sadness or tragedy surrounding her character. Many legends describe the Yuki-onna as a spirit cursed to wander the snowy landscapes for eternity, forever lost between life and death. In these versions of the tale, she is a figure of sorrow, a being who causes harm not out of malice, but out of a deep existential longing. The tragic nature of the Yuki-onna is evident in several variations of her story. In many versions of the legend, the Yuki-onna is shown to have once been a human woman who died in the snow, either due to the cold or from some other tragic event. Her death transforms her into a spirit, and she is condemned to roam the snowy wilderness, searching for warmth and human connection, even as she is doomed to kill those who come too close to her. In some versions of the myth, the Yuki-onna is described as having fallen in love with a man she encounters during a snowstorm. In one famous story, she spares a young man who is lost in the snow, warning him to never speak of their encounter. He agrees, and they part ways, but years later, he reveals the secret of his meeting with the Yuki-onna to his wife. Upon hearing this, the Yuki-onna, in a moment of wrath, reveals her true nature and kills him. This story speaks to the Yuki-onna's deep yearning for love and connection, as well as her ability to destroy what she desires most. Her tragic beauty lies in her unattainable love and the emotional isolation that causes her to harm others. This sense of emotional depth is what sets the Yuki-onna apart from many other figures in folklore. She is not merely a monster or a ghost to be feared. She is a complex being, driven by her own desires, grief, and frustrations. In some stories, she is a representation of unrequited love, as she seeks warmth and affection, but is unable to connect with others. In others, she embodies the pain of loss and the lingering grief that keeps her trapped in the snowy wilderness, unable to move on. Her coldness is not just physical, but emotional. She is a creature of isolation, forever bound to the harsh landscape of winter. The Yuki-onna reflects the reality of loss, of desires that are never fulfilled, and of the inner turmoil that can lead to destructive actions. Her story serves as a reminder of the power of nature and emotion, both of which can drive a person or spirit to extremes. One of the most striking aspects of the Yuki-onna's legend is the way she straddles the boundary between life and death. She is a figure that does not fully belong to either realm, caught between the living world and the afterlife. This liminality gives her an eerie, unsettling presence. As a spirit, she is neither fully alive nor truly dead. She is something in between, much like the snow itself, which exists in a state of constant flux. Snow is both beautiful and dangerous, capable of offering serenity and peace, but also of bearing and isolating. In this way, the Yuki-onna becomes a representation of this fragile balance between life and death, warmth and cold, connection and isolation. She is the embodiment of the destructive beauty of nature, a force that is at once enchanting and deadly. In some versions of the story, the Yukiana is seen as protector of the mountain or wilderness, guarding the territory against intruders. In these stories, she is not so much a vengeful spirit, but a guardian of the natural world, ensuring that the harsh winter months remain undisturbed. She is a symbol of the power of nature, asserting her dominance over the human world, and reminding people of their vulnerability in the face of such overwhelming forces. These versions of the Yukiana add a layer of reverence to her character. She is not merely a figure to be feared, but one to be respected. She represents the untamed, uncontrollable aspect of nature that can both nurture and destroy, depending on how humans interact with them. This sense of reverence for the Yukiana reflects the broader Japanese belief in the sanctity of nature, where even the most fearsome spirits are seen as deserving of respect. Despite the fear that the Yukiana evokes, there is also a sense of attraction to her. Her beauty, her mystery, and her tragic nature make her a figure that both repels and fascinates. She is a spirit that transcends the traditional boundaries of fear and desire, embodying both the danger and allure of the unknown. In many ways, she represents the duality of nature itself, its ability to both offer life and take it away. The Yukiana is a reminder that beauty and danger are often intertwined, that the things that attract us can also hurt us. She is a force of nature, an elemental being whose actions are not governed by human concept of good and evil, but by the whims of the natural world. The Yukiana's tale is one that speaks to the fears and mysteries of winter. The snow, which can seem peaceful and serene, also carries with a sense of isolation and desolation. In the deepest winter, when the world feels cold and inhospitable, the Yukiana emerges as a reminder of the unforgiving nature of the world. Yet, in her tragic beauty, there is also something deeply human. She is a figure that mirrors the vulnerabilities, desires, and emotional pain that all humans experience, making her a timeless symbol of the fragility of life. Through her, we are reminded of the tenuous balance between warmth and cold, between life and death, and the complex ways in which nature can both sustain and destroy. In the modern world, the Yukiana continues to inspire writers, artists, and filmmakers, her story retold in countless ways, each time adding new layers to her mythos. She remains a symbol of the enduring power of nature, of the emotional complexities that reside within all of us, and of the mysteries that lie in the spaces between life and death. As a figure of both danger and longing, the Yukiana will forever remain one of the most compelling and tragic beings in Japanese folklore. Her presence is elusive and powerful as the snowstorms that give her life. One of the most compelling and often chilling figures in Japanese folklore is the Joragumo, or binding bride, a creature whose mythos combines elements of seduction, transformation, and terror. The Joragumo is often depicted as a beautiful woman who, at her core, is a spider demon capable of ensnaring and devouring her victims. Her story is one of deceit, allure, and danger, blending the themes of nature's inherent power with the vulnerability of human desires. The Joragumo's myth operates not only on the fear of the supernatural, but also on the universal fears surrounding the manipulation of desires, the complexity of human relationships, and the unknowable darkness that can reside within seemingly innocent appearances. At first glance, the Joragumo appears to be a beautiful woman, often portrayed in traditional Japanese attire, with long, flowing hair and a captivating appearance. She can be found in remote or desolate areas, sometimes in secluded mountain forests near rivers or deep within dense thickets of bamboo. Her beauty is striking, and her demeanor is gentle and alluring, drawing unsuspecting travelers to her. In many stories, the Joragumo lures men to her lair, where they are ensnared by her spider-like webbing and subsequently devoured. Her ability to transform into a seductive woman is a powerful symbol of the deceptive nature of desire, where what appears to be beautiful and enticing can ultimately lead to destruction. The transformation of the Joragumo from a simple spider into a human woman is deeply symbolic. It reflects the duality of nature, the gentle and the violent, the life-giving and the life-taking. Spiders in Japanese culture, as in many other cultures, are seen as creatures that balance both creation and destruction. They spin webs that can trap prey, but they also help maintain ecological balance by controlling insect populations. In the case of the Joragumo, her transformation into a woman adds another layer to her symbolism. She is not just a creature of the natural world, but one that embodies the paradox of beauty and danger coexisting. Her allure is not just physical, but also psychological, as she represents the dangers of unchecked desire and the darkness that can hide beneath surface-level attraction. The Joragumo's connection to spiders further deepens her symbolism. In many cultures, the spider is a creature associated with fate, destiny, and control. The intricate webs that spiders spin are often seen as metaphors for the webs of fate that connect individuals to one another, as well as the entanglements that can occur within relationships. The Joragumo, as a spider demon, embodies this notion of control. She weaves her web carefully, ensnaring her victims with precision and purpose. Her victims are often helpless, caught in the web she spins, just as individuals can become trapped in their own desires, mistakes, and relationships. The Joragumo is a reminder of how easily one can be drawn into situations that seem enticing or beautiful at first, but can ultimately lead to harm and destruction. What makes the Joragumo particularly terrifying is her dual nature. While she is capable of ensnaring men with her beauty and seduction, she is also a merciless predator. When her victims become entrapped in her web, they face a gruesome fate. She devours them, often with no remorse. This combination of seduction and violence reflects the dark side of human nature, the ability to desire something deeply and to be drawn toward it, only to find that it is destructive and dangerous. The Joragumo embodies the psychological tension that arises when attraction becomes obsession, when desire turns into something all-consuming. Her acts of violence are not just physical, but also symbolic of the emotional and psychological destruction that can come from unrequited love, manipulation, or unchecked passion. In several variations of the Joragumo legend, she is described as a creature who has lived for centuries, growing more powerful with each victim she ensnares. Some stories depict her as a solitary being dwelling alone in the wilderness, while others suggest that she may have been once human, but transformed into a spider demon due to a curse or the consequences of her own actions. This transformation is often portrayed as a form of punishment, though it is also a reflection of her inherent darkness. The idea of transformation, of a human being turning into something monstrous, is a powerful motif in Japanese folklore, representing the consequences of succumbing to one's darker impulses. The Joragumo, in her monstrous form, is not just a creature of terror. She is a tragic figure who reflects the destructive consequences of desire, betrayal, and vengeance. Despite her malevolent nature, the Joragumo's myth serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of falling prey to illusions. Her beauty is the primary weapon she uses to trap her victims, yet this very beauty is ultimately revealed to be her greatest deception. She symbolizes the idea that appearances can be deceiving, and what seems like a harmless or alluring situation can quickly turn into something lethal. The Joragumo serves as a reminder to be cautious and aware of the potential consequences of unchecked desires. This cautionary aspect of her story is amplified by the fact that she preys on men who, in their lust or curiosity, are often too willing to follow her into danger. The victim of the Joragumo is usually not a naive or innocent person, but one who has been enticed by her charm, making the encounter all the more tragic. The victim, too, is complicit in their downfall, drawn to something they believe to be beautiful but ultimately fatal. The Joragumo's lair is often depicted as a dark, remote place, typically a house in the middle of a forest or a hidden cave by the river, where the webs are spun and victims are trapped. This location mirrors the emotional isolation that the Joragumo symbolizes. She dwells in places where few people go, far from civilization, reflecting her removal from the human world. Her space is one of entrapment, where the outside world is kept at bay, and the victim becomes trapped in her world, much like the prey she ensnares in her web. The isolation of her lair adds to the sense of dread and inevitability surrounding the encounter with the Joragumo. Once a person is drawn into her web, escape is nearly impossible. In the context of Japanese culture, the Joragumo can be seen as a reflection of the societal views on women and relationships during the times these stories were told. Women were often viewed as both nurturing and dangerous, capable of both great beauty and destructive power. The Joragumo embodies this duality, using her femininity to lure men in, only to reveal the deadly force beneath the surface. This can be interpreted as a symbol of societal fear of female power and sexuality, as well as the dangers inherent in the exploitation of both. The Jorogumo's ability to ensnare her victims represents the dark side of desire, the point at which lust, obsession, and infatuation turn into something sinister. This dual nature of the Jorogumo, both seductive and deadly, reminds us that the allure of something can often be a warning sign of impending danger, and that the consequences of desire can be fatal. The Jorogumo is also a figure of transformation and consequence. Her monstrous form represents a corruption of the human soul, the way that base desires can warp an individual into something unrecognizable. Her ability to shift from a beautiful woman to a horrific spider demon mirrors a process by which individuals can change when driven by negative impulses, greed, lust, revenge. The tragic part of her myth lies not just in her predatory nature, but in the idea that she was once human, a being who might have had hopes, desires, and a past of her own. The transformation into the Jorogumo symbolizes the loss of humanity in the pursuit of dark desires, a transformation that not only affects her physically but also corrupts her essence. Throughout the years, the Jorogumo has appeared in various works of literature, art, and popular media. Her image continues to captivate and terrify, often as a symbol of both feminine power and destructive potential. She remains one of the most complex and multidimensional creatures in Japanese folklore, embodying themes of seduction, betrayal, transformation, and vengeance. Through her myth, the Jorogumo reminds us of the dangers that lie in pursuit of unchecked desires and the consequences of falling into the traps we set for ourselves. Her beauty, allure, and cunning serve as a potent warning, a reminder that the line between attraction and danger is often thinner than we realize. In the vast landscape of Japanese folklore, the Rokuro Kubi stands as a fascinating and eerie figure, one whose myth embodies the intersection of human nature, supernatural transformation, and the blurring of boundaries between the ordinary and the grotesque. Often described as a creature with the ability to stretch its neck to extraordinary lengths, the Rokuro Kubi exists in a space where the mundane aspect of human life and the terrifying possibilities of the supernatural converge. The figure of the Rokuro Kubi draws from both human fears and desires, reflecting the vulnerability of the human body and the potential for hidden, dangerous forces within even the most ordinary-seeming people. Her story, rich in symbolism and unsettling imagery, represents a complex blend of seduction, horror, and mystery. The Rokuro Kubi is most often depicted as a human woman during the day, living a seemingly ordinary life in a village or town. At night, however, her true nature is revealed. She has the ability to stretch her neck to terrifying lengths, a physical transformation that is both grotesque and disturbing. In some stories, the Rokuro Kubi uses this ability to engage in frightening or sinister activities, such as spying on people, causing harm, or scaring those who encounter her in the dark. In other versions, her transformation is less about malevolent intent and more about a condition she cannot control, an unfortunate curse that causes her to undergo these frightening changes while she sleeps. This duality of the Rokuro Kubi, a seemingly harmless human by day, but a monstrous being by night, plays into the themes of deception and the hidden nature of evil in folklore. Her story often involves a tension between what appears to be normal and what lurks beneath the surface, hiding in the shadows. The image of the Rokuro Kubi's neck stretching is one of the most enduring and terrifying aspects of her myth. Her ability to elongate her neck to unnatural lengths evokes a sense of unease, for it is a transformation that defies the natural order. The image itself is unsettling. Her body remains rooted in place while her head extends beyond normal human proportions, stretching into the darkness like a snake or some other creature of the night. This grotesque alteration of the human body is both physical and symbolic, representing the disruption of natural boundaries and the violation of what is considered normal or safe. The Rokuro Kubi's transformation reflects a deeper fear of the body's potential for change, something that can shift unpredictably and uncontrollably. This fear of the body's mutability also taps into the universal anxiety surrounding the loss of control and the sense of alienation that can occur when one's body begins to behave in unexpected ways. In many stories, the Rokuro Kubi is not a solitary figure, but part of a larger community of supernatural beings. These beings, often yokai or spirits, represent the forces of nature, human desires, or societal fears. The Rokuro Kubi's transformation is often linked to these other spirits, as she may be seen as a part of a family or group of yokai who share similar traits or abilities. In some versions of the tale, The Rokuro Kubi's behavior is tied to her interactions with other supernatural beings. For instance, she might be seen as part of a group of women who are all cursed with the ability to transform, and her transformation might be tied to some sort of supernatural punishment or consequence. The nature of these communities, often depicted as isolated or hidden from human society, serves to highlight the Rokuro Kubi's liminal status, caught between the human and the supernatural worlds, forever straddling the line between the two. One of the most striking features of the Rokuro Kubi's myth is her dual existence as a human and a yokai. By day, she is indistinguishable from any other woman, blending into society and leading an ordinary life. At night, however, she undergoes a terrifying transformation that reveals her true nature. This duality speaks to the theme of masks and hidden identities. What appears to be one thing on the surface can, in an instant, turn into something wholly different. The Rokuro Kubi is, in a sense, a metaphor for the hidden aspect of human nature, the parts of ourselves that we try to keep concealed, or the aspects of our lives that, when revealed, might shock or disturb others. Her story evokes the idea that the most terrifying and unsettling things often lie just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. The Rokuro Kubi is a being who inhabits both the human and supernatural realms, making her a liminal figure who constantly shifts between the ordinary and the monstrous. The transformation of the Rokuro Kubi is not just a physical change. It also speaks to the psychological and emotional tensions within her character. In many versions of the myth, the Rokuro Kubi is portrayed as a creature cursed by some event in her past, often a wrongdoing or a transgression. Her transformation into a supernatural being may be a punishment for her actions, or perhaps as a manifestation of her inner desires, fears, or unresolved conflicts. In some stories, the Rokuro Kubi is driven to harm others, not out of malice but due to a curse or compulsion that she cannot escape. This notion of transformation as a form of punishment or consequence is a powerful element in many Japanese folklore stories, where characters often undergo supernatural changes as a result of their actions, whether good or bad. The Rokuro Kubi's monstrous neck might symbolize a physical manifestation of inner conflict, guilt, or an unresolved past. The stretching of her neck becomes an outward expression of what cannot be contained, an uncontrollable force that erupts from within. The Rokuro Kubi's ability to extend her neck also symbolizes a form of voyeurism, as she is often depicted spying on people or witnessing events from a distance. In many versions of the tale, her extended neck allows her to peer through windows or into places where she should not be, reinforcing the theme of intrusion and invasion of personal space. This act of voyeurism is not just about physical observation, but also about the discomfort of having one's private life exposed. It reflects the fear of being watched or judged, a theme that resonates deeply with the anxieties of human existence. The Rokuro Kubi's ability to see and hear things that others cannot creates an eerie sense of unease, as if something is always watching, lurking just beyond the bounds of human perception. In some variations of the myth, the Rokuro Kubi is not inherently malevolent, but rather a tragic figure who is cursed with her transformation. This version of the Rokuro Kubi story emphasizes a theme of inevitability, the idea that the curse or transformation is something that cannot be escaped, no matter how hard she tries. Her attempt to live an ordinary life are doomed by the supernatural forces that govern her existence. This tragic aspect of the Rokuro Kubi's character makes her more relatable, as it reflects the universal fear of being trapped in a situation or condition that cannot be changed. The curse of the Rokuro Kubi speaks to the human experience of feeling out of control, of being subjected to forces beyond one's understanding or ability to manage. The idea of the Rokuro Kubi as a cursed figure also connects to broader themes in Japanese mythology, where transformation and metamorphosis are key elements of the narrative. In many stories, beings undergo transformations as a result of moral lessons or as a consequence of their actions. The Rokuro Kubi's transformation might be seen as a reflection of the complexity of human nature, the way that seemingly benign aspects of life can, under certain conditions, turn into something darker and more threatening. This theme of transformation is central to Japanese folklore, where the line between the human and supernatural realms is often fluid, and where the nature of a person or creature can change as a result of their desires, actions, or fate. The Rokuro Kubi also serves as a reminder of the vulnerability of a human body and the potential for horror that exists within the physical form. The stretching of her neck is both grotesque and unnatural, a violation of the body's boundaries and a fearsome reminder how easily the human form can be manipulated. This fear of the body's malleability, of its potential for strange and uncontrollable transformations, is one that runs deep in many cultural myths. The Rokuro Kubi represents that fear in its most exaggerated form. Her neck becomes an uncontrollable, grotesque extension of herself, a visual manifestation of something that should be contained but is instead allowed to extend into the unknown. Despite her eerie nature and the terrifying consequences of encountering her, the Rokuro Kubi remains an important figure in Japanese folklore, representing the balance between the human and the supernatural, the ordinary and the monstrous. Her transformation from an ordinary woman to a creature of terror reflects the complex interplay between the mundane and the extraordinary, highlighting the hidden fears and desires that lie beneath the surface of human existence. The Rokuro Kubi serves as a reminder that the boundaries between the human world and the supernatural are often not as clear-cut as they seem, and that what is most terrifying is often what is closest to home. Her myth speaks to the deep-seated fears that exist within all of us: the fear of the unknown, the fear of transformation, and the fear of the boundaries between what we think we know and what we cannot see. The figure of the Nararahyon stands out in Japanese folklore as one of the most curious and unsettling supernatural beings. Often described as a mischievous and elusive creature, the Nararahyon has captured the imaginations of people for centuries with its peculiar behavior and its ability to blend into human society. Unlike many other yokai who are clearly monstrous or overtly threatening, the Nararahyon is typically depicted as a being that resembles an elderly man, sometimes with an elongated head or an exaggeratedly large face, with the ability to seamlessly infiltrate human households and cause trouble in the most subtle and sneaky ways. Though its actions may seem harmless at first, the Nararahyon is often a symbol of the disruption of the natural order, a creature that embodies the fear of the unknown and the potential for chaos hidden in the everyday world. The Nararahyon is most famous for its ability to appear in a form that is almost indistinguishable from a human being. It is typically described as an elderly man who enters homes during the night, moving about unnoticed and often performing acts of mischief. In many accounts, the Nararahyon will stroll around a house as though it belongs there, making itself at home, even though it is not invited. It might sip tea, help itself to food, or sit by the hearth without anyone noticing it is anything other than a regular, if somewhat odd, guest. This ability to blend into human society is one of the most unnerving aspects of the Nararahyon's nature. It represents the way in which the supernatural can infiltrate the most mundane aspects of life, making the familiar strange and disconcerting. The Nararahyon is not a violent or overtly dangerous creature. Rather, it causes a sense of unease through its very presence, suggesting that even in the most ordinary moments, the world around us may be more chaotic and unpredictable than we realize. One of the most striking features of the Nararahyon is its appearance. It is often depicted as a humanoid figure with a large, round head, sometimes with exaggerated facial features, such as large eyes or a long nose. Its form is often said to resemble an old man with a bent posture, and it typically wears traditional Japanese clothing, such as a kimono. This appearance makes it look like a harmless, even pitiful figure, an old man who might be mistaken for a wandering stranger or confused relative. However, this inconspicuous form is precisely what makes the Nararahyon so dangerous. Its ability to blend in with human beings allows it to operate unnoticed, infiltrating the home and creating a sense of confusion and disturbance without any clear sign of a threat. The unsettling aspect of the Nararahyon's appearance is that it looks just enough like a human to be familiar, but its exaggerated features and mysterious behavior create an uncanny sense of discomfort. It is a creature that occupies a space between what is normal and what is otherworldly, evoking the fear of the unknown that lies just beyond the edge of perception. In some versions of myth, the Nararahyon is said to be a kind of trickster spirit, causing confusion and chaos by simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Its actions, though not overtly malicious, often result in minor disruptions that leave people feeling uneasy. The creature might disturb the household by knocking over objects, disarranging furniture, or making strange noises in the night. In some accounts, the Nararahyon is also said to cause mischief by impersonating other people, mimicking the voices of family members or friends, and further disorienting its victims. The creature's goal is not to cause direct harm, but rather to create an atmosphere of confusion and discomfort. This low-level, insidious chaos is what makes the Narerahion so effective as a symbol of the unpredictable forces of the supernatural. Its presence is a reminder that the world is not as stable or orderly as it might seem, and that the boundaries between the human and supernatural realms are often fragile. The Narerahion's mischievous nature also links it to the broader themes of balance and disorder that pervade Japanese folklore. In many cultures, the presence of trickster figures serves to challenge the status quo, to introduce an element of chaos that disrupts the established order. In the case of the Narerahion, its disruptive actions reflect the idea that the natural order is not as rigid as it appears. The creature's ability to move seamlessly through human spaces, taking what it wants and leaving behind only confusion, suggests that the boundary between the ordinary and the supernatural is not always clearly defined. The Narerahion embodies the fear that something out of place, something unfamiliar, might be lurking just beyond the surface of everyday life, ready to upend the delicate balance we rely on. Its mischievous behavior, though seemingly harmless, reminds us that the supernatural forces in the world are not always easy to identify or control.